We were on the NFL.com's Super Bowl champs page. It breaks down the history of the quarterbacks who won Super Bowls, the teams, and how they were headed into the playoffs, winning and losing, the offenses, the defenses, and the playoff seeding. As you can see by this metric, most of the Super Bowl winners were first-round draft picks. But at least, was it 3 teams decided Derek Carr wasn't good enough to be drafted in the first round, including the Raiders. But they had a high pick at number 5, and they selected this unknown linebacker called Khalil Mack. He hasn't done too much, has he? Not too much last night. But as you can see, small percentage, actually a good chunk right there of first pick overall. Then you have second round and a 17th rounder. First pick overall, you got Terry Bradshaw. This raises the thing. Terry Bradshaw won 4. Troy Aikman won 3. Jim Plunkett, drafted by the New England Patriots. Not the USFL Patriots of today, but the New England Patriots with the Patriot logo, red, white, and blue. Not this, I don't know, some other country. The uniforms now. But he got a better uniform many years later. I think he was drafted in 71 or something. But he got drafted, traded from, the 49ers, and then I think he got dumped or whatever. Al Davis picked him up, and he was on the bench when Pastorini, the Houston Oilers quarterback, big quarterback too. I just looked up his stats because I was looking up something about, players playing with broken ribs and stuff. I just happened upon his story. That's how the flak jacket or whatever it's called. It's kind of like a bulletproof vest for quarterbacks. How it was invented. The Pittsburgh Steelers broke 3 of his ribs. He was in the hospital, and 2 guys entered his room. One had a baseball bat, and the other one a brown paper bag. And he thought they were going to kill him. Some people stick guns in brown paper bags and take them out. I don't know. The baseball bat is a little obnoxious, I guess. But they had this like bulletproof vest for his ribs. They put it on him and they started whacking him with the baseball bat, and that's the invention of the flak jacket that quarterbacks use. But he had a good run there, 80 and 83 with the Raiders. Then there's John Elway. He probably shouldn't be included, him and Eli Manning, because both of them were crybabies. John Elway refused to play for the Baltimore Colts. He said he was going to go play baseball instead. Eli Manning's parents didn't want him playing for, I forget which team. So he went to the Giants instead. And Peyton Manning, whatever about him, no pick ever came out that was just as celebrated as Peyton Manning. Even if he did look like a second or third or fourth, maybe the 100th, if you count all the Hammer films, of Frankenstein. There was one last pick, and that was Bart Starr. He won a couple Super Bowls, but he also won a bunch of championships, so I guess that was good money. As you can see, there's 26 out of 47 were drafted in the first round. But people passed on Derek Carr. And Kenny Stable, who was drafted by the Raiders, he sat on the bench for 4 years. I think he finally got his chance like in 72 or something. And I think he made a pretty good run. Brett Favre, Drew Brees. See if this works right. It goes to winning and losing. 5-game streak entering the playoffs. 47 winning teams. 13 of them out of 47 were 5-0 in the final 5 games. Hope the Raiders are actually paying attention. 4-1 records. 18 of 47. 3-2 records. 13 of 47. Losing records. That's not a good way to go in. But 3 teams. It says the 2012 Ravens, 1-4. That's not good. 2009 Saints, 2-3. 2006 Colts, 2-3. And the reason that happens, it's even possible, is if you get in the playoffs, the season starts all over again. It's a one-game season, and it's a new season next week. And as long as you keep on winning, you win. Won their season openers. 38. See if any Raiders are on there. The 80 Raiders did it. The 76 Raiders did it. 83 Raiders did it. Keep on winning. Wins at home. 13 of 47 Super Bowl champions finished unbeaten. 17 out of 47 had one loss or a tie. 6 teams finished with a home record of 6-2. 1970 Colts were 5-1-1. Let's see, just jump to who had a losing record. 2012 Ravens again, 1-4. Or was this like jumping around? No, let's get down to the nitty gritty. Offenses. Eventual Super Bowl champions averaged 392.6 points per season, allowing an average of 246 points per season, and own a 146.4 point differential per season. He has a slight problem with this little statistic. It's even dating all the way going back to the 60s, where the season was 14 games long. There's one other problem. The salary cap. Didn't have a salary cap back then. And they didn't have these rules where you couldn't touch a wide receiver. You got to hit the quarterback in his knees up until probably sometime in the 90s. You got to hit him in the head, and you didn't get suspended or anything like that. You may have got a 15-yard penalty back in the 60s, like Ben Davison would get, but you didn't get kicked out of the game. I mean, you didn't get really in trouble. You didn't get suspended like you do now. And it was much different. The defenses were stronger in many ways. And you also had the AFL for a while, which was a wild league playing each other. So it's much different. Offensive rank. This is showing the best on this side and below average. Pittsburgh. What year is that? I don't know my Roman numerals, but they had the lowest ranked offense. But something tells me they probably had the highest ranked defense that year. And this site does not mouse over. Points scored. Yeah, I think this is a little skewed because it's different eras. It's like baseball, whatever, the steroid era, and comparing that to like the dead ball era, when the ball ball was basically like a Nerf ball. It's like wound by hand. How tight could you get string on a baseball or whatever? Only 4 Super Bowl champions scored 500 total points or more. 94 49ers, 99 Rams, 1998 Broncos, 2009 Saints. As you can see, those are fairly modern because it's very hard to score. Again, I have a problem with this. You should be able to mouse over these dots. Super Bowl champion with the fewest regular season scored was the 1982 Redskins with 190. That was the year before they played the Raiders. They would have played the Miami Dolphins in the Super Bowl, which lost. Rush rank. Only 4 teams featured the NFL's top rusher. 1992 Cowboys, 93 Cowboys, 95 Cowboys, that's Emmitt Smith, 1998 Broncos. Only 2 of the 47 champions were ranked number 1 in rushing. 72 Dolphins, that would be Larry Zonker and company. And 85 Bears, that would be Peyton Manning, Walter Payton. The 2011 Giants had the lowest ranked rushing offense, 32nd for a Super Bowl champion. I seem to recall they also had the worst defense, if I remember right. As my dog snorts. Sacks allowed. The fewest allowed in a season by a Super Bowl champion are 9. The Raiders aren't going to make that. Carr got sacked a few times, and he had 11 going into the game, and he still got 5 more to go. And then again, these modern players, despite the fact there's all these protection things for quarterbacks and wide receivers, these modern players are in better condition. They're not, they're given medical treatment after a game, or they don't go to what would it be called? They don't go to one of those massage parlors, and after they go to the bar or in between or whatever, they have professionals taking care of them, looking after the nutrition and massaging them down and blah blah blah. So they work out. They actually only have one job. If you go back to the 60s, Ben Davison, I guess he used to work out his neck because he was afraid of hurting his neck because he liked to spare his victims. And that was the extent of his working out, I think. And he had a job in the off season. So the most sacked allowed in the season was 55 by the 83 Raiders. Ooh, that was a lot. And that's why Jim Plunkett, he almost didn't show up for that Super Bowl. I mean, think about it, because I can't remember how many games Mark Wilson started that year, but he did start some games. They used to, during that era, they used to go back and forth. One would get injured, the other one would come in, because you used to be able to hit quarterbacks in the knees. He had knee problems and stuff. Probably had shoulder problems too, because you could slam the quarterback down. Total yardage. The Saints, over 400. The Rams, over 400. Right now, there's a bunch of teams over 400 because the wide receivers can get away with anything now. Only 2 Super Bowl champions, 70 Colts, 73 Dolphins, average less than 300 total yards per game. Let's go right down to the nitty-gritty. The real nitty-gritty defense. That's all people have been complaining about in this salary cap era is the Raiders cannot win the Super Bowl because they have the worst defense ever or something. 8 of the 47 Super Bowl champions were ranked number 1 in total defense in the NFL. The 1972 Dolphins, 74 Steelers, 77 Cowboys, 85 Bears, 92 Cowboys, 96 Packers, 2002 Buccaneers, 2008 Steelers. Very few of them played in the salary cap era because you can't really build a complete team. If you try to build, you notice there's no teams that are like sort of average. There are sort of, but they're not going anywhere. It's usually the teams that have one advantage on one side or the other. And they, whatever they make up for it, just over the top play or whatever. The lowest rank in total defense by a Super Bowl champion, as I said before, was 27th by the 2011 Giants. The Raiders, I think they're around that range. I think they're 26th. So they're in good company. And David Carr once played for the Giants. He might have been on that team, actually. He might have been on that team. That's a connection. He was on the Giants at one point. Points allowed. I know the Raiders have given up about 300 already. 13 of the 47 champions were ranked number 1 in total points allowed. Of that group, the 1982 Redskins allowed the fewest points with 128. And they played the Dolphins, as I said. The most points allowed in a season by a Super Bowl champion was 400 by the 2011 Giants. There's 5 more games. And the Raiders have, I think, given up about 300 points, roughly. So, if they're going to win the Super Bowl, 5 times 20 is 100. They're probably going to give up more than 20 points in the next 5 games per game. So they will surpass that. So they're in potential record territory right now. Rushing allowed. 1999 Rams allowed the fewest rushing yards per game with 74.3. The Raiders are nowhere near that. The 2006 Colts allowed the most per game. Wow, 173. Raiders are nowhere near that. So they're average, if they can make it. Sacks. The most sacks recorded by a Super Bowl team, 64 by the 85 Bears. Yes, they used to sack them. Dent. Can't remember the other guys' names. Singletary. The fewest sacks by a champion this season was 25 by the 2006 Colts. Ooh, the Raiders might be in that territory as well. Defensive rank, I think we already went through that. Yeah. The last thing is playoff seeding. There have been 23 Super Bowl champions under the current playoff format, 1990 to 2012. This is not going way back. Here is the breakdown of seeds, regardless of conference of the champions. As you can see, a bunch of yellow. Number 1 seed does count, seems of late. Number 2 seed counts oftentimes. Number 3 doesn't seem to have much company. Number 4, a little more company. Number 5, less company. Number 6, just a couple companies. It's not wise to be seated very low these days. And one thing I would point out about the Raiders, where they're going to be seated, or where is best, I do not think just because they played well on the road, which includes Mexico, although they do get another home game at San Diego. Just because they played well on the road and they've had their 2 losses at home doesn't mean that should be the trend. And there's one problem. Derek Carr might have proved me wrong a bit wearing that glove. He was able to wear that glove and throw the ball around pretty good. But I worry about the size of his hands in the cold, and even a glove. I've never used one of those gloves. I just know living in New England, it gets pretty cold around the time of the Super Bowl. The playoffs or whatever, which would be, if it was obviously imagining things here. If the Raiders were to play the Patriots in the championship game, it would be somewhere around late January, mid to late January, somewhere around that time. And it's basically, I think it's January 22nd or 21st, but it's up here. It's going to be about, on average, about 30 degrees and goes down to 15. It would be a late afternoon game. Once the sun goes down, it's very windy up here this time of the year. The Raiders have a lot of players on offense that may have never really played in the cold, like Amari Cooper. Probably never even seen cold. Maybe a bowl game. I don't know. I don't know what happens with that. I don't know his whole history. Your hands will shrink and it'll be harder to grip. And you got to rely on a running game. Don't know how good the Patriots are at stopping the run. Don't know the size of their offensive linemen, because you can point out that the defensive line or the defensive front of the Denver Broncos, which the Raiders ran all over, was a small line. That's how they could really, really dominate. Instead of letting Von Miller, go around, squeeze by, use a technique to, belittle, befuddle the right guard, especially, or right tackle rather. What's his name? Austin Howard and others. But then later in the game, when they just starting to run every time, you can see Donald Penn just throwing him around like a rag doll. But if you don't have that sort of setup, like the Raiders didn't have in Texas, playing the Texans rather, yeah, in South Texas or is it in North Mexico, or against the Carolina Panthers, who stopped the run. They have a very big front. I don't think the Raiders' offensive line is totally elite. I think there's a lot of tireage. There's a lot of extra weight there, and maybe not enough mass of muscle. But against smaller defensive ends and linebackers, these tweener types that they've been using, I think they can muscle them. They can muscle them around in the run, not the pass. See, the pass, they can blitz people. They can do all sorts of things to confuse you. Get the alignment straight to the quarterback. But you don't want to really go into New England. You actually want it at home, so you don't have to deal with all that noise, because they're going to be very loud. It's a modern stadium, and they're going to be... Massachusetts has the highest per capita alcoholism, so they'll be very drunk and loud, and you want it in Oakland. The reason you want it in Oakland is what I was hearing yesterday. I was listening to that crowd, just watching the game online, listening to it on the radio broadcast actually, and they were extremely loud, And they were louder than any other Raider home game this year. And they were extremely silent when Derek Carr went up the tunnel. As I said, I don't know if I said it before, Bruce Irvin was right at the end of the game. Derek Carr was resurrected. It was like he came back from the dead. That's what Bruce Irvin said. And it's true. The Raiders, all their hopes. I remember years ago, 3 years ago, a lot of Raider fans said Khalil Mack is the Raiders. He's the face of the Raiders. He is the leader. He is a leader on defense to a certain degree. He is the best player on their defense side of the ball. That is a granted. But Derek Carr is the leader of the team. He's the spokesman for the team, and he is going to be the MVP. Whether they give it to him or not, he is the MVP of the NFL. He has not been caught cheating, inflating, deflating. He's not been walking into head shops. He doesn't play on a team that was just 1 year removed from a 12-4 number one seed record, as is the case with the Dallas Cowboys, who just basically retuned up. They got a better running back. They got McFadden in 2015. He was on the Raiders and he couldn't run anyway. He just ran into brick walls because the offensive line of the Raiders was not that good running the ball. And I don't know if it's because it's personnel grouping or just technique or new players, but they weren't that good. And Derek Carr, he is just 3 years removed from starting the season 0-10. And the Raiders were pathetic. They were pathetic in the first game of last year. They were pathetic in the second half. He loses his center. He loses Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper is injured. And it's just pathetic. You give him the tools. You see what he does. I mean, you can't expect a carpenter, a bricklayer to work without his tools. He's got to have decent tools. He's got to have things, resources at his disposal. And he's been given that. And he's not been arrogant about it. He's been a team leader. And he's got them believing in him. He's got Raider fans believing in him. When he got injured, I just sat back and, I was concerned, but I was like, he's going to have to come. He's coming back. It's a dislocated finger. I saw it. I analyzed it on the video. I could see it was a little crooked. Yes, it's a very painful thing. It's going to be painful, but the pain is going to subside immensely once it's popped back in. And that's a process. He was probably more scared of the process of someone having to snap that, pull it out, pull in, realign. It pops back in. There is some internal damage. I guarantee they'll do an MRI on it and analyze it, but it's really nothing. They might not have to do that. I mean, because there's going to be some internal damage. It's going to be black and blue, and it's going to be puffed up, and he's going to need to ice it. And it's a tedious task. Keep on icing it, massaging it, moving it, or whatever. And it's gonna hurt for a while. He's probably going to be hurting in the next game. But it was night and day when he left. It was like, is that David Humm at quarterback for the Raiders? Who's playing for the Raiders now? They just collapsed. It's just the entire, not just the offense, the defense collapsed, which was hanging in the game, creating plays right before the half. He is the league MVP. And in this salary cap era, who's to say the Raiders can't win it all? They haven't won it all since 1984, the 83 season. But I think they're in better shape than they were then. They have a better quarterback. Sorry, Jim, but Derek Carr is a better physical quarterback than Jim Plunkett, Kenny Stabler, and Darryl LaMonica, and Tom Flores. He's the best quarterback the Raiders have ever got. And in this era, which the rules have slightly changed, he knows how to work within those parameters. And he is the MVP. He should be announced the MVP right before the Super Bowl.